There is a particular kind of silence that happens at 3 in the morning, when your body is exhausted but your mind refuses to stop. You lie there, staring at the ceiling, and your thoughts start circling like vultures. What if I lose my job? What if they stop loving me? What if I fail in front of everyone who's watching? What if I'm simply not enough? This is not weakness. This is not a personality flaw. This is anxiety, and 2,000 years ago, a group of philosophers looked directly into this same darkness and built a system strong enough to walk through it without being destroyed. Today, you're going to learn 10 of their most powerful lessons. Lessons that have pulled emperors, slaves, and ordinary broken people out of the exact pit you might be standing in right now. Stay until the end, because lesson 10 is the one that changes everything that came before it. Welcome to Wisdom of the Stoics, the home of ancient wisdom for the modern mind. Here we take the teachings of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, philosophers who faced plagues, betrayal, exile, and the crushing weight of power, and we translate their hard-won clarity into tools you can use today, in your actual life, with your actual problems. If you have ever felt like the world is moving too fast for your mind to keep up, you are exactly who this channel was built for. So settle in, because what you're about to hear is not theory. It is a survival manual. Let me introduce you to someone. Her name is Elena, and for the purposes of this video, she is going to walk this path with us. Elena is 34 years old. She runs her own small design studio. She has 2 clients threatening to leave, a mortgage payment due in 9 days, and a mother who calls every evening to ask if she's doing okay, which somehow makes her feel worse. Elena has read the productivity books. She has tried the breathing apps. Nothing sticks, because the apps treat anxiety like a glitch to be patched, when really anxiety is a signal, a very old, very primal signal that something needs her attention. The Stoics didn't try to silence that signal. They tried to understand it. And that difference, understanding instead of suppressing, is where real peace begins. So let's begin with the foundation stone of everything the Stoics ever taught about anxiety. And it is deceptively simple. It is called the dichotomy of control. Epictetus, a man born into slavery who later became one of the most respected teachers in Rome, opened his entire philosophy with this idea. Some things are up to us, and some things are not up to us. Our opinions, our impulses, our desires, our aversions, in short, everything that is our own doing, these are up to us. Our body, our property, our reputation, our position, in short, everything that is not our own doing, these are not up to us. Anxiety, almost without exception, is what happens when we try to control the second category as if it were the first. Think about what actually keeps you up at night. It's rarely something you have full power over. It's what your boss thinks of you, whether your partner will stay, whether the economy will collapse, whether your health will hold. Your mind is working overtime, trying to manage variables. It was never built to manage, like a man frantically spinning a steering wheel that isn't connected to any wheels. Epictetus would say, stop gripping the wheel. Find out what part of this situation is actually yours, and put your entire energy there. Elena cannot control whether her 2 clients leave. She can control the quality of the proposal she sends them tomorrow morning. The moment she stopped losing sleep over the outcome and started pouring her focus into the one email, she could actually write well. Her anxiety didn't vanish, but it stopped ruling her. This is not passive resignation. This is precision. You stop wasting your limited emotional fuel on 100 things you cannot touch, so that you have enough left to move the 2 or 3 things you actually can. I want you to pause here right now and think of one thing that has been circling in your mind this week. Now ask yourself honestly, is this actually mine to control, or am I gripping a wheel that isn't attached to anything? Type your answer in the comments below, because I promise you, someone reading it will recognize themselves in your words, and that alone can loosen anxiety's grip. Now let's meet James. James is 28, and he works in finance in a city that never seems to let him breathe. James's anxiety doesn't look like Elena's. His shows up as anger, snapping at his brother over text. replaying arguments in the shower for 20 minutes after they're already over. James's problem isn't that he can't control outcomes, it's that he keeps reacting to events as though the event itself is what hurts him. And this brings us to the second lesson, one of the most liberating ideas in the entire history of philosophy. It comes from a man who described himself as physically weak, prone to illness, tormented for most of his adult life, and yet he became a personal advisor to emperors and a symbol of unshakable calm. His name was Seneca, and he wrote this line that should be carved into the wall of every anxious mind. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Not because reality is never painful, it certainly is, but because the human mind has a terrifying ability to multiply suffering long before it arrives, and to keep it alive long after it's gone. James wasn't hurt by the argument itself. He was hurt 20 more times by replaying it. Elena isn't hurt by losing a client. She hasn't lost one yet. She is hurt by a client she imagines losing, a client who in her mind has already left, already told other people not to hire her, already ruined her business, none of which has happened. The Stoics called this catastrophizing before the word even existed, and they had a brutally effective remedy for it, something Seneca called the premeditation of adversity, or premeditatio malorum. Instead of pretending bad things will never happen, which is what most self-help tells you to do, they told their students to actually sit down and imagine the worst outcome clearly, in detail, and then ask, could I survive this? Could I rebuild? What would I actually do the next morning? Almost every single time, the honest answer is yes. I would survive. I would find a way. I have survived hard things before. That answer, spoken to yourself in advance, drains the monster of its power, because the monster only terrifies you in the dark. The moment you turn the lights on and actually look at it, it becomes a problem, and problems can be solved. Fears cannot be solved, only endured or dissolved. Try this tonight. Take the exact thing your mind keeps circling around, and instead of pushing it away, sit with it for 90 seconds. Picture the worst realistic version of it happening. Then finish the exercise by writing down in one sentence what you would do the next day if it did happen. You're not being pessimistic. You are taking your power back from your imagination. Now here is where the Stoics say something that might feel uncomfortable at first, but it is one of the most quietly revolutionary ideas ever put into words. And it comes from Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the known world at the time, a Roman emperor who ruled during war, plague, and betrayal from within his own family, and who still found time every night to write private notes to himself. Notes that we now call meditations, never meant for anyone else's eyes. Marcus wrote something like this to himself. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your judgment about it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. This is the third lesson, and it is the one that separates people who merely survive anxiety from people who genuinely transform their relationship with it. It is not the event that disturbs us, it is the story we tell ourselves about the event. A rejection email is just ink on a screen until your mind attaches a story to it. A story that says, this means I am unworthy, this means I will always fail, this means everyone can see what a fraud I am. The email didn't say any of that. Your interpretation did. This isn't about pretending bad things are good. The Stoics were not toxic positivity influencers. They lost children. They were exiled. They watched Rome burn. They knew suffering intimately. What they insisted on was this, that between the event and your suffering, there is a gap, a space where a judgment is formed. And inside that gap is the only real freedom any human being has ever possessed. You cannot always choose what happens. You can always choose what you decide it means. Elena's client leaving does not mean her business is doomed. It could mean she has room now for a client who pays better. It could mean nothing more than one difficult relationship ending. The event stays the same. The meaning is entirely up for negotiation, and you are the only one allowed at that negotiating table. If this idea is landing for you, the way it's landed for thousands of people who've messaged this channel over the years, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps push these ideas to someone else who might be lying awake tonight, needing to hear exactly this. Let's bring in Marco. Marco is 61, recently retired, and he thought retirement would finally bring him peace. Instead, it brought a different kind of anxiety, the anxiety of time. Without deadlines structuring his days, Marco found himself anxious about mortality itself, about how much time he had left, about whether his life had meant anything. This leads us into the fourth lesson, and it is one the Stoics returned to again and again because they considered it essential medicine, not just philosophy. It is the practice of memento mori, remembering that you will die. I know this sounds like strange advice for anxiety. Surely thinking about death makes things worse. But the Stoics discovered something almost paradoxical, that a clear, honest relationship with mortality actually dissolves most of the smaller anxieties that plague us daily. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself constantly about how short life is, not to depress himself, but to sharpen his focus on what actually mattered. Seneca wrote an entire essay called On the Shortness of Life, arguing that life is not short. We simply waste most of it on things that don't matter, and only realize this when it's almost over. Here is the practical version of this for Marco and for you. Anxiety often thrives on an illusion, the illusion that you have infinite time to fix things, infinite time to worry, infinite time to postpone the life you actually want to live. When Marco began each morning by simply acknowledging today is not guaranteed, his anxiety about the distant future quietly reorganized itself into urgency about the present. He stopped anxiously waiting for some future version of peace and started building small moments of it today, a walk, a real conversation with his daughter, silence on his porch without his phone. Memento mori isn't morbid. It's clarifying. It asks you a simple piercing question. If this were genuinely one of your last days, would you still be spending your energy worrying about the thing you're worrying about right now? This brings us naturally to lesson 5, which Marcus Aurelius returned to more than almost any other idea in his private journal, and it might be the single most practical anxiety tool in this entire video. It is the concept of living in the present moment, not as some vague mindfulness slogan, but as a precise mental discipline. Marcus wrote that even if you were to live 3,000 years, or 10 times that, you could not lose any other life than the one you're living now. And you cannot live any other life than the one you're now losing. In other words, this exact present moment is the only currency you actually possess. The past is a memory, a story your mind is replaying. The future is a prediction, a story your mind is projecting. Neither of them exists in physical reality right now. Only this moment does. Anxiety, almost by definition, is a mind living somewhere other than now. It is either dragging you backward into regret, replaying what you said wrong, or dragging you forward into fear, rehearsing what might go wrong. The Stoic remedy is not to fight these thoughts. Fighting them gives them more power, but to gently, repeatedly, return attention to what is actually happening right now. What do you hear right now? What can you physically feel right now? What is actually true about this exact second, not 5 minutes from now, not tomorrow, not next year? When James started practicing this, catching himself mid-spiral and asking, what is actually happening right now, in this room, he found that 90% of the time, the honest answer was, nothing is wrong right now. I'm safe right now. The danger existed only in the story his mind kept telling about the future. I want to pause here and ask you something. What does your mind do most often? Does it drag you backward into the past, or forward into an imagined future? Drop a comment telling me which one, past or future, because understanding your own pattern is the first step to interrupting it. And I genuinely read these. Let's move to lesson 6. And this one deals directly with a very specific kind of anxiety, the anxiety of what other people think of you. This might be the most common form of modern anxiety there is, amplified endlessly by social media, by workplaces, by the simple human fear of being judged and found lacking. Epictetus had a piece of advice here that sounds almost harsh at first, but is deeply freeing once you sit with it. He said that if someone speaks badly of you, do not defend yourself against the accusations, but simply reply, "He was not aware of my other faults," or "he would not have mentioned only these." There's a dry humor in that response, but underneath it is something profound. The recognition that you will never, under any circumstances, control what other people think of you, and trying to is one of the most exhausting, anxiety-generating projects a human being can undertake. Elena's anxiety wasn't only about losing clients financially. If she's honest with herself, a large part of it was about what losing those clients would say about her. Whether people would think she wasn't good enough, whether her failure would become a story other designers whispered about. The Stoics would ask her, and would ask you, whose opinion are you actually trying to control here? And is that even a project that can succeed? You cannot manage the inner narrative of another person's mind. You never could. The energy spent trying to manage your reputation in the minds of others is energy stolen directly from the actual work of living well. Marcus Aurelius, the most watched, most judged man in the entire Roman world, wrote to himself that it takes so little to make a happy life. It's all within your thoughts. And yet he still had to remind himself again and again to stop caring so much what others thought. If an emperor had to fight this battle daily, you and I are not failing by struggling with it too. We are simply human. The goal is not to stop caring entirely, that's inhuman. The goal is to stop outsourcing your peace to a jury that changes its verdict every single day. Now, lesson 7, and this is where the Stoics get almost scientific about the architecture of anxiety itself. They notice something that modern psychology has only recently caught up to, that anxiety thrives on vagueness and shrinks in the presence of specificity. A vague worry, something bad might happen with money, feels enormous, infinite, unmanageable. A specific worry, I might not make rent this month, immediately invites a specific response, a plan, a number, an action. The Stoics practiced what we might now call radical clarification. When a troubling thought arose, they didn't just feel it, they interrogated it. What exactly am I afraid of? What exactly would happen? What exactly could I do about it? James used to lie awake with a fog of dread about his job, a fog with no edges, impossible to fight because it had no shape. When he finally forced himself to write down, in exact words, what he was actually afraid of, "I'm afraid I will be let go in the next round of layoffs, and I have 4 months of savings," the fog became a fact, and facts can be worked with. Facts have edges. You can build a plan around a fact. He built a small emergency plan, updated his resume, quietly reached out to 2 contacts. Not because the fear vanished, but because it became specific enough to act on. This is one of the most underused tools against anxiety that exists. Taking the enormous, shapeless dread in your chest and forcing it, on paper, into exact words. Try it after this video. Write down, in one clear sentence, the exact thing you're anxious about, not the feeling, the actual fear. You'll likely notice it immediately looks smaller and more solvable than it felt at 2 in the morning. Lesson 8 is about something the Stoics valued perhaps more than any other virtue, and it directly counters one of anxiety's favorite weapons, which is the feeling of powerlessness. This lesson is about focusing entirely on effort rather than outcome. The Stoics drew a hard line between what they called the target and the aim. You can aim carefully, you can do everything right, and still miss the target. Because outcomes always depend on factors outside you: luck, other people, timing, circumstance. What you can always control is the quality of your aim, the discipline of your preparation, the honesty of your effort. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a person should do the right thing and let the rest happen as it happens. This might sound like it removes ambition, but it does the opposite. It removes the paralysis that ambition creates when it's tangled up with anxiety about results. Elena stopped anxiously refreshing her email, waiting to hear back from a client, because refreshing her email changes nothing about the outcome. What changes the outcome, or at least gives her the best possible chance at a good one, is the quality of the proposal she already sent. Once the aim is taken and the arrow released, her job is done. The target's response belongs to the target, to circumstance, to timing, none of which is hers to control. This single reframe, judge yourself by your effort, not by results you were never fully in charge of, quietly dismantles an enormous amount of daily anxiety, because it gives you back a job you can actually finish. We're getting close to the end now, and I want to remind you, if any part of this video has resonated with you so far, subscribing genuinely helps this channel keep translating these old, tested ideas into modern language for people who need them, and it costs you nothing but a tap. Now let's continue, because lessons 9 and 10 might be the most important ones in this entire video. Lesson 9 deals with something almost nobody talks about when they talk about anxiety, and that is the difference between avoiding discomfort and building the capacity to hold it. Modern culture teaches us that anxiety is a problem to eliminate, a sensation to medicate away, distract away, breathe away as fast as possible. The Stoics had a very different relationship with discomfort. They practiced something called voluntary hardship, deliberately choosing small doses of difficulty, cold water, simple meals, short periods of discomfort, not to punish themselves, but to prove to their own nervous system that discomfort is survivable. Seneca, despite being one of the wealthiest men in Rome, would periodically live for a few days as though he were poor, sleeping on a hard bed, eating the plainest food, wearing rough clothing, specifically so that poverty would lose its power to terrify him. He wrote that we suffer more from imagining hardship than from actually experiencing it, and the only way to prove that to yourself is to occasionally, deliberately, experience a small amount of the very thing you fear. This is profound for anxiety, because anxiety is largely the nervous system's prediction that discomfort will be unbearable every time you avoid a hard conversation. Every time you numb out instead of feeling an uncomfortable emotion, you are quietly teaching your own brain that discomfort truly is unbearable, which makes the next wave of anxiety even louder. But every time you deliberately choose a small, manageable dose of discomfort and survive it, you are gathering evidence for the opposite conclusion. Marco started taking cold showers most mornings, not because it's trendy, but because in that 30 seconds of discomfort, he practiced staying calm inside something uncomfortable, and that calm slowly began transferring into the rest of his day. You don't have to take cold showers. Maybe it's making the phone call you've been avoiding. Maybe it's sitting in silence for 10 minutes without reaching for your phone. The specific practice matters less than the underlying lesson. Discomfort is not your enemy. Avoidance is what keeps anxiety alive. And now, lesson 10, the one I promised would tie everything together. This lesson comes from a phrase the Stoics used again and again, in different forms, across hundreds of years and 3 very different lives: a slave, a statesman, and an emperor. And it is this: you always have the choice of your inner citadel. No matter what is happening outside you, no matter what has been taken from you, your reputation, your money, your health, even your freedom, there remains one place that nothing external can touch. And that is the space of your own judgment, your own will, your own inner response to what happens to you. Epictetus, who was literally enslaved, who had his leg broken by his master, still taught that the essential part of him, his mind, his judgment, his character, was never actually in chains. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by war and plague and betrayal by people he trusted, still returned every single night to this same fortress inside himself, a place untouched by any of it. This is the culmination of everything we've walked through today. Elena cannot control her clients, but her inner citadel, her discipline, her craftsmanship, her integrity remains entirely hers. James cannot control the market, but his inner citadel, his character, his effort, his honesty remains entirely his. Marco cannot control how much time he has left, but his inner citadel, how he chooses to spend today, remains entirely his. And you, whatever is circling in your mind tonight, whatever kept you up at 3 in the morning last week, cannot always be controlled from the outside. But there is a place inside you that no circumstance, no rejection, no failure, no uncertain future can ever fully occupy unless you hand it the keys yourself. The Stoics didn't promise a life free of hardship. No honest philosophy can promise that. What they promised, and what they proved through their own genuinely difficult lives, was that a person can remain steady inside the storm, not by pretending the storm isn't happening, but by building an inner citadel strong enough to weather it. So here is what I want you to take with you tonight. Anxiety is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is often a sign that you are gripping a wheel that was never yours to steer, that you are suffering inside a story your imagination wrote before anything actually happened, that you have forgotten, even briefly, the fortress you already carry inside you. Elena, James, and Marco are not going to have perfect lives after this. Neither are you. But each of them, using these exact 10 lessons, found something sturdier than a perfect life. They found a steady relationship with an imperfect one. That is what Stoicism actually offers, not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of an unshakable center within it. If even one of these 10 lessons landed somewhere real for you today, I would genuinely love to hear which one in the comments below. It helps me know what to go deeper on in future videos, and it helps someone else scrolling through the comments feel a little less alone tonight. If this video gave you something worth carrying with you, consider subscribing to Wisdom of the Stoics. We release new videos translating this ancient discipline into modern, practical guidance every single week. And share this with the one person in your life who, is quietly carrying more anxiety than they let on. This might be exactly what they need today. Until next time, remember, the storm outside you may not be yours to control, but the citadel inside you always is. Take care of it.